Hi, I'm Merike Hess, and welcome to today's episode of Hey, Hi, Who Are You? The podcast where we explore everyday creativity with a regular human. And so today's guest, my sister is on the show, Helmi Hess, and she is really cool because a lot of the creative things she does is inspired by science, as she is a biologist by trade, but she does a lot of creative things on the side. So we're going to hear all about that today, so stick around. Okay, well, hello.
Hello.
Welcome.
This whole podcast is going to sound like the same person. If people hear it on audio without video, they're going to think it's you talking to yourself.
Yeah, it's going to sound like just like a weird echo or like my other personality. But I mean, that's basically relatively accurate, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's funny to try and interview you because I know everything about you.
Yeah, it's like a weird inner monologue, like asking you deep questions that they already know the answer to.
Yeah, it's like we must reflect on the things we know about ourselves. We must.
Smeagol and I. Call him.
Ew. Gross. Okay, well, I already introduced you in my little intro that I already pre-recorded.
Well, what did you say?
Secret.
Oh, God. Okay, well, it's hopefully not like, here's my stupid sister.
Everyone
now,
laugh at her.
Fun of everything she says. We're going to put a laugh track on for this one.
That's like almost verbatim, weirdly.
Oh, God.
Oh, cheers.
Oh, cheers. What are you drinking?
A beer.
Me too.
Well, I guess you are coming to us from Uxbridge, Ontario, for anyone who doesn't know.
Uxbridge, which is literally in eternal Christmas, because every hour on the hour, the church bells still play Christmas songs. So I walked my dog today to I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus.
On January 20th.
January 20th.
No one, like, Uxbridge is like, this is our only shtick. We can't let it go.
Exactly. All the Christmas lights are still up. But luckily, they took down that creepy Santa Claus in front of the candy store, so that's good. I was avoiding that way for a while.
Gross. That's creepy. I guess as an introduction, why not talk about that? Well, it's very relevant because your whole background is so pretty and you've always been super into like room and home decor and always just outfitted with all the craziest thrifted things. So
do you want to go on a house tour?
Yeah, sure.
I'll have you on mobile item that can house tour.
It has to be narrated, however, because people
narrated. Okay, there we go. So that's an old like bamboo screen that I tied
silk scarves
onto, like silk scarves. And again, birds everywhere, even though they're kind of hiding. And then skip over that part. But here's my TV setup with Girl with the Pearl Earring and my pothos plants that I bought in Vancouver and have trekked across the country with me in my Jeep and my dog in the middle of the summer. And there's me. Hello. This isn't how it's normally set up. It's just because I was trying to get good lighting with all my lamps. So that isn't normal. But these are, well, that one's thrifted and I love it. And that one is from my friend's aunt's farm who just died. And most of this stuff is also from her, but she's so cool. She would have totally been someone good for your podcast if she was still alive. She's so cool. She did like enamel artwork and had her own kiln in her house where she did all of her stuff and like made enamel jewelry that was like actually really funky and like, anyway, super cool. And then my room is messy. I didn't know anyone was going to be coming over because it's locked down.
Anyone was going to be coming in.
But this is my unmade bed, and I hated this ceiling, garbage ceiling, so I covered it up in my room with stuff, which made it dark, but I have these fun lamps that are also thrifted, which I'm turning on for your sake. One of them, and then I don't know how to turn the other one on. People are going to really hate this episode.
Turn the other one on.
Whatever, I usually live in the dark. Oh, and Sheboygan. Say hi to Sheboygan.
Oh, yes, Sheboygan is a fake antler deer head on the wall, and it says Sheboygan, Michigan underneath, and his name is Sheboygan.
Okay.
Just go sit down again.
Okay, well, I just appeared back in my corner.
Okay, well, now we've gotten back from our home tour. Almost unsolicited home tour.
Whatever. I love showing people around. You know how many humans have entered this building while I've lived here? Like 3
True.
illegally.
Only break-ins.
Yeah.
With home decor, explain your childhood bedroom at our house and what you decided to
Oh
DIY it
no.
as.
Well, it was based on Phantom of the Opera. So my whole room was painted like a deep dark red with like gold trimming everywhere and chandeliers. And so I bought a chandelier that was missing a whole bunch of crystals and bought more crystals for it at like St. Lawrence Market. And I think even a couple of them are from Portobello Road in London. Basically, everything was crystal and gilded gold and like red. I painted the ceiling as the sky, which is super lame-o. And I had this dark red, like thick, soft fleece unicorn blanket that was also red and gold. And then my clothing is in like a crystal hutch, which is so stupid. It holds nothing at all, nothing. And all of my shoes were in. So from the basement of our house, I took from the fireplace. I took like a cast iron, the log holder from the fireplace, and the gold, and put all my shoes in there as my shoe holder.
Very you, circa 2014.
Yeah. Well, Phantom of the Opera, it wasn't really supposed to be Phantom of the Opera. It was supposed to more be Opera Populaire, which is like the cool opera building that it's based on. So that was better. I didn't have like masks. Oh, I do have masks in there. But they're
You
from
have
Venice,
Venetian
so it's
masks
okay.
and a Victorian school desk for your old TV. And your old TV is sitting on
Which is
top
propped
of
on
an
a hard
old
drive of an old
computer
desktop
tower.
computer.
It's on top of an old computer tower that no longer works. And you were using that only as a stand for your old TV from the 90s from our sister's
Oh my god. And
ex-boyfriend,
it has a Green Day sticker and a Hello Kitty sticker on it, which I love.
which is
And
very
occasionally
2000s.
I have to open the CD drive so I can dust it. And forever, on top of my hutch, which had my clothing in it, there was a stuffed white tiger, which was like life size, which just took up all of the room in my room. And me and Merike together named him
Shagwa.
Shagwa. It was a mix of Sagwa and Shigwa because we didn't want to choose one or the other, so it's Shagwa.
And it's from a Canadian TVO kids show about Chinese cats.
And we still know the whole theme song and occasionally sing it together.
Yes, and you will not be hearing that today.
No, you can YouTube that later, at a later date.
Please, I encourage you to YouTube this.
Oh God.
Oh God. I can see your tattoo peeping out from your dress. So this is a good opportunity potentially also to talk about your tattoos.
Well, there's a bunch. Most of them are themed on biological topics that I hold dear to me. So the first one I got, I'm gonna stand up so you can see it. That's the first one I got, and it has a savanna sparrow in it, which was the first bird that I ever studied in a field research project. Um, should I go into Kent Island now or talk about Kent Island later?
We could jump right into Kent Island. Sure, why not?
Okay, well, so Kent Island was sort of like the beginning of my life. um, um, for I guess like 4 months I lived off the coast of New Brunswick where there's like this big island called Grand Manan that about 1,000 people live on. And off the coast of Grand Manan, about a half-hour lobster fish boat ride, I lived on a tiny, like 1 kilometer long, uninhabited island doing wild bird research for 4 months. And one of those months, I was like entirely alone on the island, and basically just had to check in with the lobster fishermen on this two-way radio twice a day so that they could make sure I was alive. Um, and no one lives there. Well, that was sort of the fun part that no one lived there. So I essentially turned our research building into like a witch's shack. I collected because I had nothing to do and there was no internet and no TV and like I'd read all the books in their library and everything. I essentially just had to like identify. Well, I didn't have to, but I decided to.
A
My
voices
alter
in
ego
your
told
head
me I
told
have
you.
to.
Yeah. Oh God.
Exactly. It was you that told me, wasn't it?
It was me. I was whispering into a seashell and you were listening to the seashell.
Yes, exactly. Well, basically, I took it upon myself to identify every flowering plant on the island, and I would dry them and put them into this identification book that I made. And I ended up figuring out which ones were medicinal and which ones were edible, and making a tea blend. And I still have a bunch of that today, which I use very sparingly because I love it. Um,
You also
and
dried flowers, those same flowers, for each of our birthdays and made really beautiful artwork out of them.
I did. I made flower crowns on both of my, well, two sisters' birthdays, and then pressed them in this giant flower press so that the flowers that were picked on their birthday were in a flower crown that dried up. And I wrote these poems in Estonian to go with them, which were like surprisingly poetic for someone who does not write any poetry.
Especially in a different language that you speak, but not like perfectly.
Exactly. Like the house that I lived in was actually a boat shack, so it was on the dock on stilts, and the bottom floor would flood every tide, and it's in the Bay of Fundy, so it has the highest tides in the world. And the whole bottom floor floods, and the boat would lift up, and I was up the steps in this like loft where the floor planks had like giant gaps in between each plank. So if you dropped anything, it went into the bottom floor, which flooded. And one day I dropped my retainer and I had 45 minutes to find it before the before the floor flooded. And so I had
I'm
to run out of my building to my one coworker who was with me, who I had a huge crush on, and he like definitely didn't like me. Um, I went
You
and
had
I
to
knocked it
casually
on his
say,
wall.
help me find my gross ass retainer.
Exactly. And he was in a bucket of sludge in the boat on the bottom floor, and we found it, and it was like 11 p.m. Basically, I like lived amongst the birds and did. I'll tell you about the actual research. I wasn't just a witch. Um,
Yeah, you just stationed yourself there by your own volition.
no, I was working on this island has a population of this one type of sparrow called savanna sparrows that like make nests in the grass on the ground, and they have really high natal philopatry, which basically means that if they were born there, they um, pretty much foolproofly come back to the same location to breed the next year.
Oh,
And so there's this long-term research project that goes on there. It's gone on since like 1974 or something. And so it's a perfect population to research multi-generational effects of different things basically. So I was looking at stress levels in nestling savanna sparrows and how predators and inclement weather and um, territorialism between different birds and their parents' stress levels and all sorts of other factors, how that affects the baby birds' stress levels or like stress hormone levels, and then how that affects them as they grow up. So essentially, when they become adults, did the stress that they have as nestlings change their reaction to stress as adults or not? I published a paper on that, so I'm like kind of a published research scientist, which is
what do you
cool.
mean kind of? You are published.
Fair enough.
Published
Fair
and
enough.
peer
Okay.
reviewed.
Yes, and peer reviewed. Yeah, it's in General and Comparative Physiology, which is
That's very cool.
yeah, the
And
Journal of
so,
General and Comparative Physiology.
actually, since we didn't explain this before, because we got through to this through tattoos, because your tattoo you showed is a Savannah sparrow. um,
Right.
I guess you got published because you went to the University of Guelph after high school. And so,
Yeah.
what did you do there?
So my degree at Guelph was biomedical sciences, which I was doing like as a pre-med degree, and I planned on going into human medicine, um, seeing as it's more lucrative, but actually double majored in animal biology and um, human biology so that I could kind of steer towards either vet school or med school. So I went to a hospital to watch some different surgeries with my cousin's husband, who was um, an otolaryngologist, so basically ear, nose, and throat doctor. And so I watched a whole bunch of different like ear surgeries.
Oh,
And anyway, so I was watching these surgeries happen, and like the actual surgery itself was so interesting. Like I totally wasn't weirded out by the surgery. Um, and I got to like help and look at x-rays and look at all sorts of different things, and it was awesome. But what weirded me out was the whole environment of working in a hospital. And like, if I was going to be a doctor, I wanted to be a surgeon, not like a general practitioner. And so but what happened during these surgeries is, as soon as the patient is like sedated, or like under anesthesia, I suppose you don't call it sedated for humans. Now I work with like animal surgeries and we call it sedated. But anyways, the doctors would basically like be doing their normal steps, and they'd be asking each other like, how was your weekend? And like Rocket Man would be playing on the radio in the background, and like it just felt really surreal and Twilight Zone-y. And like, when the doctors would go and talk to the patients when they're in the hospital beds, they would literally be like running from patient to patient, and the 5 steps before the patient's room, they'd like slow down, take like 2 big breaths, look at the patient's case file, and on it would be like a sticky note from a nurse that says, ask this patient about their brother Tom in Australia or whatever.
Really?
And
Wow.
yeah, and so they wouldn't know anything about the patients, but to make there
Them
be a better
comfortable.
patient doctor, yeah, they
Yeah.
would like ask, oh, and how's your brother Tom in Australia that we talked about last time or whatever. And I just like didn't vibe with that. It
Yeah,
like,
it
that's
takes a
great.
certain kind of person to do it. I think it's a good
Yeah,
practice, but I think it does that is weird.
yeah, yeah. Just, and like, I don't know. It felt, yeah, like I said before, Twilight Zone-y, like very, or like Black Mirror or something, you know, like just strange, not, it just isn't the way that I like interact with people. And anyways, so
Well,
I
I imagine
decided
those
against
doctors possibly like they've probably been doing this for a while, and so they
it. Yeah,
probably don't see it in the same way that you as a new student saw it as like a huge deal, which of course
totally.
it is a huge deal. But I
And
feel
it's not bad. I'm not saying they were distracted or
yeah,
anything.
yeah,
I'm just saying, like, I didn't want to get to that point where a person is just
person. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
another like surgery, you know?
Yeah.
And I suppose I should have known that beforehand, but really what I wanted to be was a forensic pathologist. So I wanted to be investigating how and why people died through autopsies, which you don't wouldn't be done the same way. And it doesn't matter if you're listening to Rocket Man in the background because it's a dead body.
What if your spirit hates Elton John? Then like they'll haunt you.
Well, then you shouldn't have died. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, but anyways, after like kind of doing those, and I really liked the parts of my degree that were about like physiology and endocrinology, like the study of hormones and the study of like what causes different things to happen in your body. But when it got to like cardiology, like reading ECGs and like electrocardiograms and like reading like all of the like more deeper stuff that happens with human medicine, I just lost interest and didn't really care. And so after my 3rd year, I got a scholarship to do that research on the island, on Kent Island. And it kind of changed my whole perspective on science, because before I thought that like research was one of those things that only like boring like data analysts do, which is so wrong. Like, I get to run around in like the wilderness chasing birds and catching them in like homemade like like Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote traps, like basically Acme nets that like drop down on birds on their nests, and like in obviously humane ways, but like it is so exciting and fun, and like you're actually on the ground level of adding to the knowledge of mankind, or humankind, I'd prefer to say. But
And animal kind.
yeah, I don't know, way cooler. And animal kind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you're not really telling the animals about what you learned, so it sort
Oh,
of
you
is
should. You should
knowledge of
update them.
humans.
Be like, so your Uncle John died a few weeks ago, but this is why. And you explain to the baby birdie and say,
And then maybe
don't
they won't do
fret.
the same thing.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
fret.
Don't fret, baby
Bet.
birdie.
I was trying to think of a name that rhymed with fret, and I said bet.
Don't fret, Bet.
No, fret, bet. Exactly. You don't need
That
to
was
worry about
last week.
those. Yes.
Aw.
They live
Aw.
longer than that.
I guess if it was
Oh.
last week, it'd be like the life of a fly or something.
Yeah, like what do I know that lives really short period of time?
A fruit fly. But a fruit fly only lives for like 2 days or something.
Yeah.
On the
Yeah.
topic of fruit fly, a fruit fly has been terrorizing me in my own bed. Like, I
Anyway,
didn't leave anything gross by my bed, so I don't know where this fruit fly is getting its sustenance from because I only drink
maybe
water.
it's waiting. Maybe it lands on your lips and you have like tiny little bits of food left over.
Oh, gross. Well, yeah, I don't know because I've been
Or
trying to fall asleep and then the fly just randomly like lands on my nose and then it'll land on my phone screen while I'm watching Jeopardy at night.
I hate when they do that. And
I've been liking to hear from my guests when they changed what they thought they wanted to do and like why they realized that wasn't what they wanted to do. And you kind of already touched on that with your changing from thinking you wanted to do medicine to doing bird research. But then I guess you thought you wanted to do bird research and you continued to go into your master's. And then now what have you discovered from that?
yeah. Okay, well, so after Kent Island, I like loved the idea of doing field research and like writing scientific things and adding to the knowledge of mankind, like we were talking about, humankind. And then, so after that, I did more field research. I went to Alberta with the University of Manitoba and researched birds over there, looking at like the effects of oil infrastructure on breeding songbirds. Loved that. And then but I was doing that research for a bunch of master's students, and I loved what they were doing. They were all in this big team. There was like 3 master's students with like 10 field assistants, and so there was a big crew of us that was like 13 people, and we all lived together in like our field houses, and it was like an awesome team. I learned a lot and made a lot of really good friends. Loved that. So I was like, hey, this is for me. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do my master's. Um, and I applied to this position through UBC and Environment Canada, and it seemed amazing because it was in the like right in the Rocky Mountains, in this ski town, working with these birds that no one ever gets to work with because they're like the only aquatic songbird in North America, and they like dive underwater in these like super glacial, freezing cold rivers. And I got the position, and I was like, wow, this is so awesome, and I jumped right into it. Yeah, so it started off awesome. The field research part was amazing. Got to work with this girl who had been a master student for one of my advisors before, and we formed a band and we started playing in all these different cafes. And so we wrote all these songs and we started to perform. We ended up getting paid for it. We like formed a band, which was totally by accident because we walked into this cafe this one time. Shout out to the Valley Social in Fernie. And they were like, oh, do you guys play any instruments? Because sometimes we jam. And so then we were both really nervous and had only known each other for a couple of days. And we, anyways, formed a band after like just impromptu harmonizing in this cafe, um, where we ended up going because I matched on Tinder with this guy who said that he could show us some of the local birds. Anyways,
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
and that's how we ended up making all of our friends in Fernie, which was so cool because now I'm like friends with one of the city councilors, and like his dad basically became like a second father to me. Anyways, it was cool. So I loved all of that, is my point. Loved doing all the field research, loved forming my own um, like study, and doing all the data analysis was pretty awesome too. But the problem was that I didn't really have a team. It was really just me, and then I'd hire a field assistant, and that was great. But there was no one else to bounce ideas off of. There was no other grad students that were doing anything even similar to me at UBC. I was in a forestry program, even though I was doing toxicology for an advisor who had only one other student who worked in
Um,
Chile.
for a second, do you want to explain what toxicology is in case people don't
Oh,
know?
yeah. Basically, what I was doing for my project, I was looking at toxins that come as a um, kind of side effect of coal mining, um, and how like toxins from that basically um, enter ecosystems and then affect different animals that live in those ecosystems. So I was looking at selenium and how that comes from coal mining, which is basically it's a natural element in the rocks there. But when you have to break apart rocks to get at the seams of coal in the mountains, these rocks essentially release more like selenium at a faster rate because you've broken down all the rock and now it's exposed to the elements and breaks down faster, and essentially leaches into the rivers nearby and becomes part of the aquatic ecosystems there, basically entering the food web at the like algal level, and then the larvae of different insects eat this algae or periphyton, and then fish eat the insects or birds will eat the insects, and essentially the toxins biomagnify through the food web.
Yeah, so
Um,
the issue gets
and
worse as it goes up the food web is basically what
exactly, yeah. And so I was looking at whether there are developmental deformities in a certain species of bird. Um, and this was like a really big deal. It was like the coal mines there have known about this issue for a long time. Environmental groups nearby, like activist groups, have known about this issue, and there hasn't really been much done about it. And so, but unfortunately, I was sent in as the one person to go and do any research from like the federal level in a way, but really I was just a grad student at UBC. And somehow I didn't end up being in over my head during all of the research portions, and I went to all these different conferences and ended up doing um, different um, basically presentations for like international audiences, different researchers down in the States, somebody from the University of Montana, all sorts of different not-for-profit activist groups, and even got um, I had a trip paid to go to Victoria, BC to basically give a talk in front of a whole bunch of different activists, and it was awesome. But the problem is when it came down to writing my thesis, there wasn't much support, and there wasn't a team really to work with. I was
And I
sort of
guess
just like left alone.
all of your favorite parts of it were kind of taken away. Like you got to be in a place where you felt at home, in a place where you felt like creative and supported and all this stuff, and where you were doing all your favorite parts of your thesis. Not thesis,
Yeah,
master's, whatever, same thing. Um,
yeah, my thesis, yeah, my master's
master's thesis,
thesis.
I guess, yeah. And like when you were in Fernie, BC, and then when you went back to Vancouver, BC to do your actual
Writing.
master's writing, there wasn't any of those parts that kind of had made you think you really loved doing it, I guess.
Yeah, and it's not that I don't like the writing part. That part's good too. I love getting the information out to people, but really what I loved was doing those presentations, like the live presentations and actually telling the public about things that I've discovered. Or what I didn't like was the like tiny minute little bits that you have to write for the methods of your thing, and you have to like the tiny little details matter so much in your data analysis, and if you make a mistake you have to do it all over again, which like is fine, but there wasn't much else like keeping me very enthused on my topic, and working on the same thing for like 2 years when you're not really happy doing it is so draining. And it's
Yeah.
not like, okay, it's 2 years and at the end of 2 years you're done. It has nothing to do with the amount of time. You have to get the work done. And if you're not getting the work done, it's not like, oh, it's 2 years and it's over. You actually like it can take years and years and years if you're not enjoying it and you're not working on it and you're not getting it done, it like the
It
time
will
just
never get
keeps
done. Yeah.
stretching.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so basically, after doing a year of that, after I'd done all of my field research and everything, I ended up realizing that I really didn't enjoy the environment that I was in, and it felt really toxic to me, which is funny because I was doing environmental toxicology, but working in a toxic environment. um, my little play on words there, you didn't really like it, but oh well.
Well,
Um,
I mean, I appreciate it, but it's not funny.
no, it's sad. Um, but so Um, I took a year off after that and ended up nannying for my cousin in Vancouver, which was awesome because I actually got to spend time in Vancouver and not feel so anxious every day about my thesis, that I got to like join a yoga studio and like do cross country ski trips up in Whistler, and like travel to visit my friends in Fernie and visit my other friends in Victoria, and like record music and write songs and work on art and get tattoos and like all sorts of fun things that I wanted to do in Vancouver, while not having to worry so much about um, like the expectations of my thesis really. Um,
Yeah.
and then I gave
Actually,
it.
oh, I was gonna say, well,
Okay.
from that like you had all these expectations and all these things you didn't really like about your thesis, and all the things you actually wanted to do, as you were describing, were kind of more free flowing and creative and things like that, that they were actually making you feel more fulfilled. And I guess
Totally.
I
That was
actually
one of my
don't.
most fulfilled times.
Yeah, well, and I guess what I actually don't know personally, even though I know you very well, obviously, is like, did you ever consider doing a more creative route for your career? Because you are a very creative person, but I feel like you've always kind of put yourself in a scientific box. which is interesting to me because you are very creative.
Well, I think my thing is that I'm like also a huge perfectionist, and with art, you can't achieve perfection.
Hmm.
Like I with my art, I love writing songs. I love designing tattoos and like doing ink drawings and painting and like jamming with people and stuff. But when it becomes something that I have to now like make maybe earn a living off of, or like I set expectations for, it becomes just as anxiety causing as science.
Actually, I saw a TikTok that relates to this, and I feel like there's a TikTok that relates to everything. But this one TikTok I saw yesterday, I think, was this man who was painting, and he said that he often tells people that he enjoys painting, and people often ask him, "Oh, are you any good at it?" And he said, that doesn't like that question always throws me off because if someone were to say they enjoy, um, they enjoy walking, they go enjoy going for a walk, like no one's gonna ask you, oh, are you a great walker? And it's like, yeah,
Mm.
like with a lot of artistic things, for some reason, there's some idea of that you have to be really good at it to either enjoy it or to excel at it. You don't have to be it doesn't have to have this weird element of perfection, but like you said, yeah, like a lot of I think most people do weirdly add a layer of that
Yeah.
to it, which is weird.
Yeah, and like same with like whenever anyone like when people like your art, they always say, "Oh, like you should sell this." And I'm like, "No, I basically don't sell any of my art. I think I've sold like a couple of drawings as Christmas cards to a maximum of like $15 in total. And that's basically all. Like I just don't like I haven't decided to monetize that side of my life because I have the feeling like that would ruin it for me.
Yeah,
Um,
no, it's totally fair.
maybe it wouldn't. Maybe I would actually love doing something creative as a living, but I find that with science, there isn't you
Sorry,
don't have
Rue
to
Rue
achieve
has the zoomies. Rue is literally running at top speed up the
basically
stairs.
with science, I feel like you don't really have to achieve there's no expectation of achieving perfection as long as you follow protocol. As long as you follow scientific method with science, then you're going to discover something. And whatever you're discovering, even if you find that there's no results or that something didn't work, you've followed the method and you've come to the conclusion and you've added something, you know?
Yeah.
And I really love that part about science. And I love the collaborative nature and I love the curiosity that it creates. Like, okay, if this didn't work, what should we try next? If this didn't work, like, is there a different, should we even be looking for a different project or a different set of factors to look at or whatever?
Yeah, and
Um,
science can be creative. Like there really is creative ways to look at things, and there's a creative way to design a study or a creative way. Like I think, well, a big part of what I want to talk about on this podcast is like I think creativity. People think of artisticness, and creativity is not being artistic. I think there's a
no,
much wider range of creativity, and I think yeah, like what you
yeah,
bring to the table is a scientific creativity, which is really interesting.
yeah, and even like problem solving creativity is like a kind of wider base that affects a lot of different areas. And like with with field research, often we'd have to like set up solar panels, so you'd have to learn how to like do electrical work to be able to and like build a platform for the solar panel. And like um you know, you have to learn about cattle farming and how to talk to landowners of cattle farms, because a lot of your research takes place in like a certain area that you like weirdly have to know how to talk to landowners. Or like there's all these different facets that come from field research and what and like wildlife biology that I love. And that was the part that I really like thrived doing and like fed off of. And I would love to go back to that, but the problem is I've just quit my master's like a week ago. and and I'm very happy that I've done that. Like it's a huge relief to me. It just was one of those things that like I wanted so badly to be happy doing it and I wanted so badly to succeed, but I wasn't, and there was nothing I could do to make me feel happy. Like I tried doing it in Vancouver. I tried doing the work from home. I tried moving up to a cottage and deleting social media and not talking to anyone and working from there. And I still found anything else would make me happier than writing my thesis.
Yeah, and at
And
that
it's not that
point,
I didn't love my
you've
project.
given it a good try. Like, yeah, like you can't claim that you were lazy. Like it literally is. You just it's not for you.
And I can't claim that it wasn't even something that I can do. Like I can't, I'm certain I have the capacity to
Yeah, it doesn't mean
do
you're not
scientific
smart
research.
enough to do it or something. No, not at all.
No, it's more so that that certain specific environment for that project ended up not working for me. And I
Yeah.
could do a different master's if it was in a different location, a different, not even location, a different setup. Let's say there were other students working on different facets, or who knows what. Maybe that would totally change it. But so like I would love to gear back towards research, but with the pandemic and stuff, a lot of research projects aren't deemed essential. So even though I applied to a few, like there just weren't many positions available. And what I was doing for a little while I was living in Vancouver, I did at the same time, because I knew I couldn't just thrive off of only doing computer work. I ended up doing an internship at a wildlife rescue facility so that I could keep doing hands-on wildlife things and not just sit behind a desk all day basically. And I ended up really enjoying that as well, which was a completely different perspective, because with research everything focuses on the ecosystem and the causes of problems and trying to fix these causes, or mitigating effects in the wild to make sure that wild animals continue to be wild and continue to thrive in the wild. And so it's very population focused, versus rehabilitation and rescue is very individual focused, which is a very different change of pace and actually attracts completely different people to the job.
Yeah.
And is maybe not my like final goal with my life. I find it feels a
I don't think
little.
there's ever a final goal, though.
No,
I know what you mean, but I think
but
there's no final goal.
yeah, but I feel like with my current frame of mind, I feel as though this is a place where I am, it feels very temporary. It doesn't feel like I'm building and growing and achieving something that I feel is very, very fulfilling. It feels like a temporary stepping stone to something else, which makes me use the terminology of I don't think this is my final goal, but I do think this is exactly what I need right now. And I
Yeah.
am learning a lot. And I know that I want to kind of like marry the two things together. And so I've been looking into the idea of going into like wildlife veterinary school.
I was listening to a podcast for my class I'm in actually right now. And I really liked what the one lady said. It was a podcast called Women at Work, I think. Or Women, yeah, Women at Work, maybe by Harvard Law School. I'm not sure. But anyway, Harvard Business School. But what they said in the podcast was kind of like what you just said, where like this feels like something you need right now, and especially in the pandemic, like yeah, maybe this is just a stepping stone, but then you said this is exactly what I need right now. And what someone was asking the lady on the podcast was like how do you not get stuck in whatever situation you're stuck in right now, especially with considering work in the pandemic setting right now. And she said a really helpful thing sometimes might be to label your current experience as a chapter in your life, and like what would you name this chapter, and like maybe that's a good way of like compartmentalizing that, like right now is, and like realizing that right now is not forever, but like this is a valuable chapter and you can name it like whatever you need to name it to make it make sense to you. Like you right now, maybe your chapter is like learning all you can possibly learn about animals in a new setting you've never experienced. Like that's a
Yeah,
really bad chapter title, but you know what I mean?
yeah. Well, so kind of on that same topic, I just watched Legends of the Fall, which I just told you about. And
Yeah.
in that, Brad Pitt is he like has never followed the rules of the world, in the sense that he's like very, very free spirited. And there's this um indigenous person um in the movie essentially, who says that he has a grizzly in his, like there's a grizzly spirit in his soul. And for a while, like he kind of tries to settle down for a while, but he can't manage because he witnessed the death of his brother, and
Okay.
it like really hurt him. And he's got this like, he's just can't settle, he can't just stay in one place. And so he basically has to, like there were these years where he lived with the soul of the grizzly and basically like had to travel the world. And like he went to like New Guinea and all over the place. And then eventually he comes back home. And I'm trying not to like do any spoilers here, but eventually from a 1995 movie.
You've had 25 years to watch it, people.
Yeah, but maybe this podcast will be the one thing that makes you do it.
Yeah.
um, But basically, he comes back home, and there's this while where he's like kind of settled down, and the grizzly spirit has like quieted in his life. And I feel like that is the chapter that I'm in right now, where it's like a chapter of healing, a chapter of like you actually can appreciate what you have, and not live with it. Like that's not the point. I think the point is like a
Be at peace
quieter
with it.
chapter and be at, yeah, it's like a healing time where everything else is so hectic. And usually I love to be so free spirited, and I usually move once every 3 months, and I like take my Jeep across the country in the middle of the winter, and road trip wherever. But right now I've like taken a lease for a year, and I'm like on contract for a job that's full time, like on salary. And this is the first time in my life that I've been on a salaried job, not like paid hourly or living on stipends and having to write grants to get any money or whatever. And or doing something seasonal. Um, and I actually have really grown from it, because I think a lot of my free spiritedness was often running from things. Um, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because I was constantly running forward, at least not like, running back to bad things. I was constantly growing, but I've never really stayed in one place and learned how to regulate my life and regulate myself and my emotions and like
Yeah, well, you haven't
um
really had a constant, like, other than like family or whatever, obviously, but like other than
yeah,
that, like nothing's really been constant.
yeah, and this is like um I mean, we have different. So right now, I work at a wildlife rehabilitation center, and so we have different wild animals coming in every day, and we're doing surgeries and medical treatments, and it's a lot of problem solving. It's a lot of, okay, what's going on with this animal? What have we tried so far? Has this helped? Has it not? What should we try next? And that I find very interesting and exciting and new every day. But there's also a feeling of structure and a feeling of stability. And it's the same. I get to see people during lockdown because I work in an essential job, which is awesome. And I was finding not seeing people was getting harder and harder. Like living at my cottage was awesome. I used to love like living in Kent Island, where I felt at peace with the rest of my life. But in this time of not feeling at peace with the rest of my life, it's really nice to have structure and stability, and to kind of let go of some of that free spiritedness in some ways,
Yeah.
knowing that that's still who I am and still what I'm going to be doing in the future and am doing now
Yeah,
with.
I don't think free-spiritedness and peace and stability have to be separate. I don't think those are one what's the word? I don't think those are mutually exclusive, but I know what
Mhm.
you mean. Like sometimes free-spiritedness can kind of take over and not like let you see that you need some stability. And also stability people can get stuck in. People can get stagnant for sure. Like, "Oh, I'm comfortable at this job and maybe I'm not passionate about it, but I'm comfortable here." That's great and all, but that can also be toxic in its own way. So I think,
Yeah,
yeah, like you said, I think this is a good chapter for you kind of thing.
and also like taking um taking the time to realize that some of your expectations and some of your goals don't need to be given up, but they could be changed and they can be shifted, and they can be temporary and they can be long term. But you can also take what you have at the time and use it.
Yeah,
Like
well, yeah,
you
like
don't
you
have
not
to, nothing
finishing
is ever a failure.
yeah, like you not finishing your master's doesn't mean you didn't learn anything from it. Like that
Yeah.
doesn't
And it
just
doesn't
because
mean
you
that what I
didn't
learned I didn't do.
yeah, like just because you didn't get your master's degree on this piece of paper, it doesn't mean you didn't do those few years of huge learning and everything. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
yeah,
And
move on with what
I
you did
did present like a lot of those results, and like ended up consulting for a CBC documentary, and like doing all sorts of like I very massively networked doing that. Like, but I needed to remember not to look at that as like I loved that part, all the networking and everything, but I needed to remember that my happiness wasn't less important than the love of the networking and the love of the parts that I loved. It didn't mean that, oh, none of that matters. Just because I loved certain parts of it, doesn't mean that I had to keep doing it if I didn't love all of it, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you suddenly hate all of it. Like it's kind of, well, it's similar to like an unhappy relationship. Like maybe it doesn't mean you hate them. It just means that
Yeah.
the cons have begun to outweigh the pros, and maybe you do need to
Or
reevaluate.
I think I tried to say, well, a little bit different than that. Even like maybe you thought that the thing that was most important to you in a relationship was the fact that that this person is, let's say, very ambitious and very chivalrous. Let's pretend,
Sure,
like just two random things.
sure.
And they still are very ambitious and chivalrous. And those were the most two important things to you. And you want to be this person who values ambition and chivalry as the most important things. But there were all these other things that were horrible.
Yeah,
And you're like, but ambition and chivalry are my two most important things. So I have to stick with this because I
because
love
they have
those
those
things are
things.
most
Yeah,
important, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. And I
And
guess with your
but then
masters, it's similar
eventually,
to that. Yeah.
yeah, and there were things where I was like, but it's so important to me to be doing research, and it's so important to me to be making a difference and to um be living this like eco-friendly life and like doing conservate like benefiting conservation. Those are very important things to me, but it doesn't mean that that was the right way to achieve those things, you know? Like,
Yeah, yeah, like you can get, just because it has those things doesn't mean that you have to take all the other things with it. Like you can find those things in a different pathway or a different relationship or
yeah.
whatever thing you're talking about.
And it's not a failure to let go of something that's making you unhappy. It is actually a huge, like, this is one of the first
Yeah.
times ever in my life that I've like decided to take my own like mental health as the most important thing.
Yeah.
And that is like a massive success because that is really hard for a person who's like a perfectionist and highly analytical and very like has always been an overachiever. And so it's really hard to be like, this is actually more important in the long run.
Yeah, like
Um,
success, whatever the heck that means. Success isn't like, there is no, you like, you're not going to suddenly be happy when you
yeah,
struggle for years after of your masters.
exactly.
I
And
think, yeah.
career success is a very different thing than life success.
Totally, totally. Sometimes they match up, but oftentimes they don't. Um, well, I feel like we left on a pretty good note with all of that.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of like that got kind of heavy a little bit.
Yeah, but actually, that touched on a lot of the, like, I wanted to bring up mental health, which I guess we could kind of, that might be a good segue actually, because we sort of finished on sort of how we finished more on how your whole schooling and everything kind of affected your mental health and everything. So if we could,
Yeah, well, I think mostly we just talked about how like having a more holistic view on life and success leads to better mental health. Like once you realize that like you have to look at your whole life as a life and not compartmentalize it into like home life and work life or whatever, then like I don't know, I think you can live a lot more of a like successful, actually happy life.
Mhm. Yeah, true. Yeah, and like kind of saying, oh, well, this part of my life is half bad, but this part of my life is like pretty good. Well, it's like, okay, but doesn't that mean like potentially like a quarter of your life is bad? Which, like,
Yeah, if
if
you're
that's like, you only like YOLO, only got one life.
yeah, and also like the hours you spend at work are your life. You don't get those back in some other life.
It's
Like
not like you getting paid for them somehow like gives you back extra hours. Yeah.
no, that is literally like you have to enjoy that or else you're living for what? You're literally living a third of your life because like what do you have left after the 16 hours a day of sleep and work? Like eating?
Yeah, and a lot of
Living
people are too
for
tired
that?
after work to even do something they're passionate about. And
Yeah.
like that's sort of, at least with this job right now, like I think you at least have time to do things you are passionate about. Like, I mean, you've decorated your home in a beautiful
Yeah.
way that you love, and like I think you were talking
Yeah.
about having more hobbies and stuff.
And like for a while, I was like teaching at Hamilton Estonian School, and I love teaching. Like I love it. Right now, I'm teaching the co-op students at my job. I've been recording songs overseas with my friend in Estonia, which is really fun. Like we basically collaborate on this app where like I record part of it, and then he records over top, and like that has been awesome. Um, I haven't really been inspired to write any songs recently, like kind of trying to figure out what's actually important to me. I've like taken part in so many things. I was on the board of directors for like the camp that I went to, like a cultural camp that I went to as a kid, and like I don't know, all sorts of things that like added other facets to my life and gave me different like directions and purpose, and instead of just being all focused in on one thing. Um and I think it's been really good and like
Yeah,
healthy and
well,
fun.
I think you kind of, well, whenever you got really stressed about your masters, your physical and mental health literally went down the actual drain.
Yeah,
And I think we
like
already
actually.
knew that. Like you, I think you specifically, and I do too, but I think you specifically to a new degree have mental health and physical health like very much linked. And I think a lot of people don't talk about that or think about it as much as we probably should. I think like mental health and physical health are really, really linked.
Mental health is part of physical health. Your
Well, yeah,
brain
well, for sure.
is part of your body. So
Well, yeah,
like, and people try to compartmentalize those things too, and it's not separate.
but
Like,
like mental health affects physical health and physical health affects mental health. Like they are so interconnected that you can almost not separate them.
yeah, I mean, for the while that I was working on my thesis and hated it the most, um, I literally lost like 4 months of my life constantly in and out of the hospital, like on IV with a fever of 103, like, and the doctors couldn't figure out what was going on, and I just kept getting virus after virus, and then like sinusitis, and then strep throat, and then like a pelvic infection, and all these different things, and it was just because my body was failing, like my brain was unhappy, so my body was failing, and any opportunistic infection or disease took hold.
Yeah, and like
And
maybe you can't blame all of that on stress, but it definitely had like it was, if
well, that's the
anything,
trigger, right? That's
correlated.
the domino effect. Like
Yeah,
that.
like I think it was,
Yeah.
but at least correlated and at least somewhat related because it
Yeah.
was when you were the most stressed, you do get the most sick. And like we've seen that with you over and over the years.
Yeah, and it's like a bigger version of how people get oral thrush or like candida as
I
soon
don't
as they
wait.
have a
I
different.
don't know what that means.
So, like an opportunistic infection is essentially something that your body always has inside you. Like, you have like gut microflora or whatever, right? Like you have a microbiome inside your stomach that has all these different bacteria in it all the time, and it's usually balanced such that you're healthy. But if you're unhealthy in some other way, then like the bacteria in your body or whatever else can, or like the viral load in your blood or whatever, can suddenly become overwhelming because your body can't fight it anymore, even though it's constantly out of balance, like it's always
Mhm.
there. But it's opportunistic in the sense that as soon as your body can't keep it at bay, it takes over. You
Yeah,
stop
well,
getting
it's like it's
literally.
like weakening, like you're weakening the barricade or whatever. It's
Yeah,
like, well, it's like with the whole COVID situation, like anyone with prior autoimmune issues obviously is going to get COVID more easily because
exactly.
your body is already like the the they didn't batten down the hatches properly because your body doesn't know how right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, those two things totally go hand in hand, and like I've definitely lived that, and I've learned my lesson. Like you can't just take your health for granted either.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah,
it's not something that you have
as a
with.
given. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, I think we've learned that a lot through like our family having a lot of mental health things too, where you can kind of ignore it until you can't ignore it anymore.
And maybe we should not ignore it ever and look
Exactly.
at things
Maybe
preventatively
let's
instead.
not let it get to the point where you can't ignore it anymore. Maybe let's give it that little bit of attention before it gets too late, or not even too late, but necessary, like maybe not necessarily too late, but in some cases it is too late to deal with. And
Yeah,
like maybe deal with it before it ruins other aspects of your life because like we said, YOLO, only got the one.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So we got through one tattoo.
Oh yeah, I guess we could go back to tattoos.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you want.
Yeah, I
But
would love to go back to tattoos. I think like
yeah, the
Tony
rest
and
of
I
them
were
are a
saying,
lot faster to describe because like I've kind of already talked about the one about my master's, but like so that was my first one, the Kent Island one. And then the next one was these ones, which you have matching ones. You should show everyone. I have them here and here. So me and Merike and our other sister Levi all have matching tattoos, which are they look completely different, but it's the same four flowers and they represent us four sisters. One of our sisters doesn't have them yet, but hopefully she will in the future. Yeah. And so those were my kind of first ones. And then I think I got these leg ones next. I'll try not to flash everyone, but on my during my master's thesis, a lot of what I was doing was catching bugs in the water, the bugs that the birds ate. So I've got these like massive um, like mayfly and stonefly larvae on my legs. And then sounds gross, but it was really cool. Like it was something I'd never done before, work with benthic macroinvertebrates essentially. And then I have the emerged forms also on my legs. So like when they're larvae and then when they're actual flies. Um, and then the next one I got was, or maybe I got this one first, but who cares? This is one of the three lions from the Estonian crest. And it's sort of the only Estonian themed tattoo I have, but that's been a really big part of our lives. And then I kind of stopped. Well, no, then I did okay this giant one, which is I'm going to try not to flash everyone again, but
I love that one. I think that's my favorite one.
yeah, I mean it's huge. It kind of wraps around my leg, and so this one, most of my tattoos are done by people that were my friends. So that one is like kind of the entire system of my master's thesis. So it goes from, because we were talking before about how there's biomagnification through the food web, and it basically starts with the invertebrates, and then it grew up to the birds, and then I had a big tamarack tree above that because one of my band's songs was called Tamarack, and there's beautiful tamarack trees, which are kind of one of the only coniferous trees that change color in the fall, and they turn yellow, and I guess here they're called larch, and they're beautiful. And then above that, I have the Little Dipper constellation because the birds that I was studying were American dippers, and we called each other Big Dipper and Little Dipper, and I was the younger one, and so I was Little Dipper. So that was sort of like my master's thesis and my friend that was in my band, and and then that friend that did this also did this one, which is just a concept I really like. I kind of am trying to do all sorts of different biology themes. So this one's biomagnification. This one is like metamorphosis. This one is predation, and so it's a lynx and a snowshoe hare, and it's the cycle in which they like the predator prey cycle works. And I have to turn around to show you this last one.
Wait,
Awkward.
you're frozen, so we can't see. Oh, now we can see.
Oh. Okay, well, on the topic of climate change, my last tattoo that I have that's like a bigger one is this one about Arctic migration.
I mean, that was like a weird science lesson as an exploration of your body.
Yeah, well, I kind of try to use my tattoos as a biology lesson for anyone because it's sort of like the layman's way of the people always say, "Oh, what a cool tattoo," and then I get to give them a biology lesson, like impromptu.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
didn't ask
totally.
for.
Things today. Maybe we can kind of go maybe deeper into certain things when I think I want to have you and Dori and Levi, our other two sisters, on here all together. And I think that'll be sort of a different look into your life / my life / our life.
Yeah, I mean, like 3 hour long phone calls whenever we call. How did we expect to fit everything we wanted to talk about in 1 hour podcast?
We did cover the basics at least. Of course, nobody fits into an hour-long podcast in a perfect way, but I think we did cover most things.
Basically, this is just like a weird publicization of our like normal phone
Normal phone
calls.
calls / like two glasses of wine in, what kind of philosophical topics we get into. So yeah, thank you for being my third ever guest, and well, I'll talk to you later, obviously, as we talk every day. For listening, everybody. If you'd like to stay up to date with the wildlife things that Helmi's up to or the art she's doing, you can follow at Helmi's Bird Friends on Instagram. It's HELMI. Make sure to follow on Instagram and TikTok at heyhiwhoareyou.pod to stay up to date on new guests and new episodes.